Tell them you were driving, my brother said, and when I didn't answer fast enough, my father grabbed my arm, hard. The kind of grip that leaves a mark. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? I understood. I just couldn't believe it was actually happening. Let me back up. My brother Finn is 3 years older than me and has been the center of my family's universe for as long as I can remember. He played baseball through high school, got a partial athletic scholarship to state, blew out his knee junior year, and somehow that became everyone else's tragedy too. My parents spent the next 5 years trying to rebuild what that injury took from him, the attention, the money, the patience, the hope. By the time I was finishing college, Finn was 28 and still living at home, still borrowing my dad's truck, still talking about getting back on his feet. I was 25, working as a legal assistant at a mid-size firm in Columbus, Ohio, paying my own rent in a one-bedroom apartment about 12 minutes from my parents' house. I drove a 2019 Honda Civic that I'd bought used with money I saved from 2 jobs during my last 2 years of college. That car was mine in a way nothing had ever been fully mine in that family. I made every payment. I paid the insurance. I even paid for the little dashcam I'd mounted on the windshield after a co-worker had a hit and run in our parking garage. The night everything fell apart was a Friday in November. My cousin was getting married the following weekend, and there was a family dinner that night, not the wedding itself, just a casual get-together at my aunt's house. I'd driven over straight from work and had 1 glass of wine over the course of 3 hours. Finn had been there too, and Finn had not stopped at 1 glass. I knew he'd been drinking. Everyone at that table knew. My mum kept saying, "He's fine, he just needs to eat something," which is what she always said. And my dad kept steering conversations away from it, which is what he always did. When dinner ended and people started leaving, Finn cornered me by the front door. "Give me your keys," he said. "I'll take your car, you'll ride with Mum and Dad. You've been drinking. I'm fine. Finn, I'm not giving you my keys." He gave me this look, the look I'd seen my whole life, the one that said you're being difficult for no reason, and then my dad appeared behind him. "Just let him take the car," my dad said. "He lives in the same direction. It makes sense." I looked at my dad, then at Finn. Then I thought about the argument that would follow if I said no. The way my mum would spend the entire car ride home talking about how I always made things harder than they needed to be. I was tired. I just wanted to go home. I handed over my keys. I have replayed that moment so many times since then. Every single time I feel sick. I got home around 10:15 with my parents. My car wasn't there yet, which wasn't unusual. Finn had said he was stopping at his friend Marcus's place first. I changed into pajamas, poured a glass of water, was in bed by 10:30. My phone rang at 11:47. It was my mum, and she was talking so fast I could barely follow her. There had been an accident. Finn had run a red light and clipped another car on the passenger side. The other driver was okay, shaken but not hurt. Finn had pulled over. The police were there. "We need you to come," my mom said. "I'll come, but he needs to tell them what happened. Just come. Don't say anything. Just come." When I got there, 2 squad cars had their lights on. My Civic was pulled onto a side street. The front quarter panel crumpled, the headlight on the driver's side broken. Finn was standing near my dad's truck, which my parents had apparently driven over the moment they got the call. He looked pale and sober in the way people get when adrenaline hits. My dad pulled me aside immediately. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to tell them you were driving." I stared at him. "You had 1 glass of wine hours ago. You'll blow clean. Finn had warrants from that thing 2 years ago. If he gets a DUI on top of that, he's looking at real time. You understand? Real time. Dad, I wasn't driving. Nobody saw who was driving. The other driver didn't see. You just tell them you were driving. You say you swerved to avoid something in the road. It was an accident. That's it." I looked over at my mum. She was watching me with this expression I can only describe as expectant. Like this was just a thing I would do, obviously, because I was the responsible one, the one who figured things out, the one who didn't cause problems. "What happens to me?" I asked. "I still get charged." It's your first offense, no priors. You're a young woman with a clean record. You'll get a fine, maybe community service, maybe a suspended license for a few months. Your firm does DUI cases. You know how this works for first-timers. He had thought this through. He had actually thought this through before calling me. Dad, my job, your job will be fine. This isn't a felony. Stop making this bigger than it is. I don't know exactly what part of my brain stopped working in that moment. Shock, maybe. Or 25 years of conditioning to be the daughter who kept the peace. Whatever it was. When the officer walked over and asked who had been driving, I heard my own voice say, I was. The field sobriety test came back fine. My BAC was 0.02. Basically nothing. The officer wrote up the report. I was cited for running a red light and failure to maintain control of a vehicle. The other driver, a man in his 40s named Gary, exchanged insurance information with me and drove away looking confused, but okay. Finn didn't say a word to me. Not thank you, not I'm sorry, not anything. He just got in my dad's truck and they all drove away. I sat in my damaged car on the side of the road for 20 minutes before I could make myself drive home. The next week was one of the worst of my life, and I want to be honest about that because I think people imagine that when you do something like what I did, you feel heroic or at least at peace with it. I felt neither. I felt like I'd walked off a ledge in slow motion and was still falling. My insurance premium was going to jump. My car needed almost $4,000 in repairs, and my parents, who, to be clear, had caused this situation, offered to cover half. Half. Finn never offered anything. I told my supervisor at the firm what had happened. I downplayed it as much as I could, but legal assistance with pending traffic citations are a liability, especially at a firm that handles DUI defense. He was kind about it but told me there'd be a review. That review was scheduled for 3 weeks out. On day 9, my dad called me. The other driver is pushing back on the insurance claim, he said. His attorney is saying the damage is consistent with higher speed impacts. They want a more thorough investigation. My stomach dropped. What does that mean for me? It means you need to stay consistent. Don't change your story. This will blow over. I hung up and sat very still for a long time. On day 11, I got a certified letter. The case had been escalated. There was a court date, and the charge had been upgraded. Because the other driver's attorney had submitted documentation showing he'd experienced whiplash and was seeking medical damages to include a misdemeanor count of negligent operation causing injury. This was no longer a fine and community service situation. I called my dad. He told me not to panic. He said they were working on it, that they'd get me a good attorney. 3 days later, my parents showed up at my apartment. With an attorney, a man named, and I wish I were joking, Bradford Holt, who had the energy of someone who charged $800 an hour and expected gratitude for it. Bradford Holt sat down across from me in my own living room and explained, without any particular warmth, that given the escalating nature of the charges, the defense strategy would be to argue that I had been under significant emotional distress from work and personal pressures, that my judgment had been impaired not by alcohol but by exhaustion and anxiety, and that I was seeking voluntary counseling as a proactive measure. We'd want you to actually follow through on the counseling, he said. A few sessions, gets documented, looks good to the judge. I looked at my mum. You won't tell the court I have mental health issues. We're not saying that, she said. We're just. That's exactly what you're saying. Bradford Holt started talking again, something about how this was standard strategy in these cases. But I had stopped listening, because something was breaking open inside me, not dramatically, not loudly. Just quietly and completely, like a seam giving way. After they left, I sat in my kitchen until midnight. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the Dashcam manufacturer's app. I had set the camera up 18 months earlier after my co-worker's hit and run. It had a feature I'd barely thought about since, continuous loop recording that synced to cloud storage every time the car connected to my home Wi-Fi. The last sync had been the morning of the dinner when the car was parked in my lot. But that wasn't the only sync point. The system also backed up any time the camera detected a significant impact event. Like, for example, a collision. With shaking hands, I logged in. The file was there. I watched it 4 times. The timestamp showed 11:52 p.m. The footage showed Finn in the driver's seat, clearly, unmistakably, his face partially lit by oncoming headlights, his hand on my steering wheel, his foot hitting the brake a full 2 seconds after he should have. You could see the red light. You could see the other car. You could hear, clearly recorded by the camera's built-in microphone, the sound of the impact and then Finn saying, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." There was no airbag deployment. The crash was hard, but not that hard. A glancing blow at moderate speed. That was important later. I downloaded the file to my hard drive. I emailed it to myself. I saved it to a USB drive I kept in my work bag. Then I called the only person I fully trusted, my coworker Hannah, who had been doing legal assistant work for 8 years and had seen basically everything. She answered on the second ring. I told her everything. Everything. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "Okay, here's what you're going to do." The first thing she told me, call the DA's office directly and ask to speak with the prosecutor assigned to my case. Tell them you have new evidence and you want to cooperate fully. The second thing, do not tell your family. I followed both pieces of advice to the letter. The meeting with the prosecutor, a woman named Assistant DA Torres, was the most terrifying conversation of my life up to that point. I sat across from her with Hannah beside me, having taken a personal day to come with me, and I explained what had actually happened. I pulled up the dashcam footage on my laptop. Ada Torres watched it once, made a note, and watched it again. Then she looked at me and said, "Why did you initially tell the responding officers you were the driver?" I told her the truth. Every bit of it. The family dinner, my dad pulling me aside, the word warrants coming out of his mouth. The way my mum had looked at me like this was just the thing I would do because that was my role. She was quiet for a moment. "Do you understand," she said, "that filing a false police report is itself a criminal offense?" "Yes," I said. "I understand, and you're voluntarily coming forward." "Yes." "All right," she said. "Give me 3 days. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. I went to work, answered emails, ate meals I couldn't taste, slept in 2-hour increments. My mom texted twice asking how I was feeling about the upcoming court date. I replied both times with, "Okay." My brother didn't contact me at all. On the morning of the court appearance, I arrived early with Hannah. My parents were there with Bradford Holt. Finn was there in a button-down shirt, looking like someone who had no idea what was about to happen, which, as far as I could tell, he didn't. ADA Torres's office had done their work. The hearing was not what anyone expected. Bradford Holt stood up to begin his prepared remarks about my emotional state and my voluntary counseling initiative. He got approximately 45 seconds in before the judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain who had the energy of someone who had heard every possible version of every possible lie, held up her hand. "Counsel," she said, "I'm going to stop you there. I'd like to address the matter of new evidence that's been submitted to this court." My dad turned and looked at me. I kept my eyes forward. The court played the dashcam footage. It was 93 seconds long. The courtroom was so quiet that I could hear the ventilation system running. When it ended, the judge set down her pen and looked out at the room. What happened next took about 2 hours in total, though it felt both longer and shorter than that. My charges were dismissed. Warrants were confirmed for Finn from his prior unresolved matter, and the DUI charge was formally transferred to him based on the footage and the amended testimony I provided to Ada Torres. My parents were referred for investigation into witness tampering and filing a false report, charges that, I was later told, would likely result in probation and significant fines given their prior clean records, though the process would take months. Bradford Holt left the courtroom without speaking to anyone. My dad looked at me in the hallway afterward. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me with an expression I had never seen from him before. Not anger, not disappointment, but something closer to recognition, like he was seeing, maybe for the first time, that I was a person with a limit. My mom was crying. She reached for my arm and I stepped back. I can't, I said. Not right now. Finn had been taken aside by a bailiff. I didn't watch that part. I walked out of the courthouse with Hannah. It was a grey November morning, cold and flatlit, and we stood on the steps for a minute without talking. You okay? She asked. I will be, I said, and I meant it, even though I also knew it wasn't fully true yet. In the months that followed, I learned what it actually costs to do the right thing when the right thing comes late. The insurance situation took 4 months to fully resolve. Gary, the man in the other car, had genuine whiplash and real medical bills, and I felt genuinely terrible about that, even though I hadn't been driving, because I had said I was, and that had delayed his claim. His attorney was not warm about it, which I understood. It got resolved eventually, with Finn's insurance taking the hit. My firm put me on a 60-day performance plan while the legal matters sorted themselves out, which was humiliating and fair. At the end of 60 days, when everything had been formally resolved and the charges against me were fully dismissed, my supervisor called me in and told me I was off the plan. He also told me, quietly, that he respected what I'd done in coming forward, and that took some of the sting out. I didn't speak to my parents for 4 months. Not in anger, exactly. I was past anger by then. But because I genuinely didn't know what to say to them yet, and I wasn't willing to have a conversation I wasn't ready for. My mom left voicemails that started out defensive and gradually became something more like sad. My dad sent one text 2 months in that just said, I know I put you in an impossible position. I'm sorry, I didn't respond right away. But I kept it. Finn called me once about 6 weeks after the hearing. He was brief, uncomfortable, clearly prompted by someone. He said he was sorry. I said okay. He said he hoped we could move past it. I said I hoped we could move past it. I said I hoped so too someday, but that right now I needed time. He said he understood, and we hung up, and I stood in my kitchen and felt something I still don't have a clean word for. Not forgiveness, not quite, but something adjacent to it. The recognition that he was a broken person and had been for a long time, and that had never been my problem to fix, no matter how many times my family had handed it to me like it was. I go back to that moment by the front door at my aunt's house sometimes. Finn holding out his hand for my keys, my dad standing behind him, me, tired and wanting to avoid a fight, dropping them into his palm. I don't hate myself for it anymore. I was 25 and I'd spent my whole life learning that keeping the peace was my job. That's not an excuse, I know it isn't, but it's the truth, and I've had to make room for it. What I know now, the moment you lie to protect someone who wouldn't do the same for you, you've handed them something they didn't earn, and they will spend it every time, without looking back. My car got repaired. New front quarter panel, new headlight assembly, paint matched perfectly. The dashcam is still mounted on the windshield. I've never regretted putting it there. I've thought a lot about what it actually means to protect someone. Not in the abstract, not as a concept. I mean the specific, physical act of stepping in front of something that was heading towards someone else and letting it hit you instead. I did that. I stood in a parking lot at midnight and told a police officer something that wasn't true, and I told myself it was protection. And for about 11 days I believed that framing because it was easier than the alternative. The alternative was admitting that I hadn't protected anyone. I just moved the damage. What I did that night didn't save Finn from anything real. It delayed a consequence he'd been building toward for years. The warrants, the drinking, the pattern my parents had been quietly funding and covering and explaining away for a decade. Every time they absorbed one of his messes, they weren't helping him. They were just resetting the clock. And when the clock ran out and they needed someone to absorb it one more time, they looked at me, because I was the one who had always said yes. That's the thing about being the reliable one in a family like mine. Reliability, when it isn't respected, becomes a resource. They didn't ask me to lie because they thought I could handle it. They asked me because they'd spent years learning that I would. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I'm past the part where it feels like a wound. But I think it's important to name it clearly because I spent a long time calling it something softer, keeping the peace, being practical, not making things harder than they need to be. And none of those phrases captured what was actually happening, which was that I was being used and had agreed to it. What changed things wasn't the judge. It wasn't Ada Torres or the courtroom or even the footage itself. It was the night I sat at my kitchen table at midnight with my laptop open, watching 93 seconds of video, and understood that I had a choice. A real one, maybe for the first time. I could keep the story I told, run it out to whatever end Bradford Holt had engineered, absorb the fines and the professional consequences and the version of myself that came with it. Or I could tell her the truth and accept that telling the truth would cost me something too. The family piece, the role I'd always played, maybe the relationships themselves for a while. Neither option was clean. That's what nobody tells you about doing the right thing late. It doesn't feel like relief. It feels like choosing which kind of hard you can live with. I chose the kind I could look at in the morning. The dashcam didn't save me. I want to be clear about that. It gave me the means, but the decision was mine. Hannah helped me think through the steps, and I'm grateful to her in a way I don't have adequate words for. But she didn't make the call to Ada Torres. I did. Sitting alone in my apartment, knowing exactly what it would set in motion, I picked up the phone anyway. That's the part I come back to. Not the courtroom moment, not the charges being dismissed, not my dad's face in the hallway after. Just me, alone, making the harder choice because I'd finally gotten tired enough of the easier one. Finn is in a program now. I don't know the details and I haven't asked. My parents and I talk, carefully, in the way people talk when something has been broken and partially repaired. You can feel where the seam is, but it holds. I don't know yet what my family looks like in 5 years. I'm trying to be honest about that uncertainty instead of filling it in with something comfortable. What I know is this: the choices you make when no one is watching, when the easier path is right there and no one would blame you for taking it, those are the ones that actually build you or don't. I made a lot of small surrenders before I made one real stand. I'm not proud of the surrenders, but I understand them now, and understanding them is how I make sure I don't keep making them. The dashcam is still on my windshield. I don't think of it as protection anymore. I think of it as a reminder. Evidence exists whether you look for it or not. The truth has a way of being recoverable, even when you've done your best to bury it.